Welcome back, everyone, to Data Science Forever, and today we're going to be talking about historical research. Let's get started. Historical research plays a vital role in the development of theory and practice. It has relevance as a research method in all subject disciplines, and although very different from the other research methods discussed in this section, it is still a scientific method which must conform to standards of practice. This research method is concerned with reconstructing the past, identifying pieces of a puzzle, and putting them together to provide an insight and understanding of a situation, event, or process. Examining the use of terminology and definitions over time can extend our understanding of and meaning and reduce misunderstanding. It is a task of historians to gain access to the past through primary and secondary evidence, along with the personal interpretation of that evidence. How history is written depends entirely on how the researcher engages in the research process. The nature of the evidence and the transparency of the interpretation that historical research demonstrates trustworthiness. During each step of the process, it is up to the researcher to use whatever means possible to demonstrate trustworthiness without attempting to deny some level of subjectivity. These steps are presented here in a linear fashion, but with all qualitative research, you are reminded that this is an iterative process. There are a number of ways to formulate a good research question. Most historical research is concerned with the why and how questions. Using evidence to interpret these events, a good research question is a critical question, one that will lead to further questions and provoke discussion. It is also one that has well defined boundaries. Defining the scope and the coverage of any historical question can be done using chronological limits, geographical limits, and primary source restrictions, or in fact, anything that appears to be a natural boundary to your investigation. Historical research, for the most part, relies on data that already exists. For this reason, identifying the existence of data usually contributes to the formulation of the research question. You must sometimes be prepared to alter your question based on the availability of primary resources. Historical research typically relies on five types of data: documents, oral records, artifacts, photographs, and quantitative records. These are referred to as your primary sources. Collecting and recording data is different from creating new data. Surveys, case studies, and ethnographic research, action research, and experiments and systems analysis all create new data sets for analysis. Historical research is predominantly concerned with collecting and analyzing data that already exists. This is not to say that you will be aware of the data that is available. Part of the research process involves discovery, following the lead, and seeing where it takes you. The first stage in your data collection process is to establish the authenticity of evidence. In many cases, this will have been done depending on where the source was located, but it may have been done in relation to your investigation. We need to examine the source initially, which questions are in mind. What type of source is it? Is it authentic? What is its provenance? Who created the source? Is the creator trustworthy and knowledgeable? What did the source mean in the time it was created? Analysis of historical data is iterative. Analysis begins with the first piece of data collected and continues throughout the process. As it is unlikely you will have your possession of the original, your notes and bibliographic records are usually the basis for your analysis. Data collection has already taken you into the data and allowed you to begin the iterative thought process associated with qualitative analysis. Although historical research is far more than a chronology of events, the interpretation should be framed within a sound and clear chronology. A history is rarely written once. The final interpretation is usually the result of a number of preliminary discussions written as the data is collected and added to the existing framework. It is important that you write when analyzing in order to piece together the ever growing collection of details. It may be you prefer to write short pieces as each new data element is added, Or you may prefer to wait and draft your impressions as they begin to emerge. The choice is down to individual preference. The point is to write, integrate the evidence and your interpretation as you go along, always being prepared to adjust your stance as new evidence comes to light. You will reach a point in your research when you have examined all relevant sources, and at least you'll have an ideal world. More usually, you will reach a point when you have examined all the relevant available sources. The majority of researchers work within predefined boundaries: physical, geographical, financial, or durational. Once you have reached the point where no new data can be added, it is time for you to formalize and complete your interpretation based on the work you have done. This will be a combination of preparatory work you did in constructing your literature review, the wider context you have presented based on your secondary sources concerning your specific topics or areas closely related to it, and your primary analysis. Remember that you are constructing and interpreting the facts, not giving a factual account of events. There are a number of issues specific to historical research that must be addressed. The first is that within the nature of the data it is used. Is there sufficient primary data available for analysis, or is there an overdependence on secondary data? There is nothing to prohibit the use of secondary data, such as other reconstructions of events, but this should only be used to complement the primary data, such as a diary written at the time, records, or visual evidence recorded at the time. As with all qualitative research, historical research must demonstrate trustworthiness. Dependability of data is vital, as there may be no way of confirming the truth of what was recorded other than the known reputation of the source. The question that must be answered is, does the researcher demonstrate sufficient insight into the data? This is to do with the depth and the nature of the critical analysis carried out when interpreting evidence. Often this means identifying conflicting possibilities. Rigorous and systematic analysis must be demonstrated if interpretations are to be and to have real significance. There will always be alternative interpretations, but that does not make any of them wrong. What makes them untrustworthy is the lack of detailed investigation, using data to prove a point without considering alternative explanations. Insight into the data is not always about depth of analysis alone. It is also concerned with the level of knowledge the researcher brings to the data. This could be knowledge of the subject, knowledge of the source, or personal experience. If you guys like this, please comment, subscribe, and hit that like button, and I will see you guys next time. Bye-bye.